Hello listeners, welcome back to Luke's English Podcast. How are you doing today? Hope you're doing fine. So this is a podcast for learners of English hosted by me. I'm Luke. I'm an English teacher from England and I've been doing this for ages now. I mean this podcast, but also teaching English. Welcome to my podcast. Most of you are familiar with it already, but just in case you're not, this is a podcast for learners of English, and in my episodes I like to do different things. Sometimes I'll teach you vocab, grammar, pronunciation, especially in premium episodes. Sometimes I'll tell you stories, sometimes I have conversations with guests, and at other times I will just talk about pretty much anything. I'll just ramble on about life, the universe, and everything. And so here we are. This should be episode number 903, and as you can see from the title, I have decided to publish this episode, which I did mention at the end of the last episode of this podcast. So I said at the end of episode 902, which was the last one, that I wasn't sure about publishing this episode, which I think is going to be entitled something like Reading from My Japanese Hospital Diary. That's probably going to be the title. I wasn't sure about publishing it, but in the end, I have decided to publish this, as you can see. But my main reason for not being sure about this was that I have actually told this story before several times on this podcast in episodes 118 and 771. And so I was a bit reluctant to repeat myself. This will probably be the last time I tell this story on the podcast, unless it comes up in a conversation sometime or something like that. But yeah, this one's going to be called Reading from My Japanese Hospital Diary. And I thought that this might be a bit different to those other episodes in which I talked about being sick in Japan, because I'm actually reading directly from diaries that I wrote while I was in hospital. And I thought that this would probably include other details. And I thought this would probably include other details that weren't in those episodes, like more anecdotes and perhaps some just interesting stuff that I'd forgotten about. And it does have a lot of those things, but also it is still largely a retelling of a story that some of you might have heard at least twice before. So that's why I had my reservations about publishing it. But anyway, but there were enough comments from listeners telling me that I should publish this because people wanted to hear it anyway, and so I've decided to do it. I mean, after all, I do need content, don't I, on this podcast? Publishing new episodes every week does mean that I do need things to publish, and it would be a shame to let this go to waste, considering I took the time to sit down and record this at the beginning of last month. Another reason I had my doubts about publishing this is because, well, I'm wondering if it isn't all a bit too self-indulgent or something. Here I am talking about this in quite a long episode, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important, really, is it, to spend over 2 hours dwelling on this weird past experience that I had so many years ago? But somehow, it seems like an important moment for me personally in my life. And after all, this podcast has always been a personal thing and a way to share these kinds of experiences. It feels like an important moment for me personally, but I still can't quite put my finger on why. I mean, I think it was a time in my life when I broke down, actually, physically at least, but also mentally in a way. And those 2 weeks, or is it more like 10 days? I'm not sure. But that time really marks a sort of break from the otherwise normal, continuous flow of my life. It's like my life was put on hold for a while, and I had this weird experience, and then it started up again. And so I can't help looking back on this experience as a sort of threshold or line that I crossed at some point. I don't know. I shouldn't overthink it, of course. Let's just say it was just a weird moment, and it seems like it could be interesting to read what I was thinking while it happened. So now that I've really sold it to you, I don't think I have, but now that I've really sold the idea to you, let's get started. So this is what you're going to see now is what I recorded a few weeks ago at the beginning of September, when I'd recently come back from 3 weeks of holiday and I still had a suntan, which I think is completely gone now after weeks of rainy, grey weather here in Paris, where I live. So you're going to see what I recorded a few weeks ago on something like the 23rd anniversary of the time when I had a really weird and quite scary experience while living quite far from home in a different part of the world. I just want to say a shout out to all my Japanese listeners, by the way. Hello, Japanese listeners. I do want to make it clear that I have a tremendous amount of affection for your country. I love Japan, and I think about my time there very positively and warmly overall, despite the sort of trouble that I had in this particular experience. Also, I want to give a shout out to anyone who's ever fallen ill in a foreign country, many miles from home, unable to speak the local language and feeling very lost and frightened. If you've ever been in that situation, then you will know how I felt when it happened to me. So anyway, let's rewind a few weeks to the beginning of September when I recorded this. So now let the self-indulgent rambling continue. Now, in this episode, what I'd like to do is actually read out some pages from a couple of old diaries which I rediscovered recently. And these are diaries from the time when I was stuck in a Japanese hospital for 2 weeks, a long time ago. Is it a long time ago? So I was in that hospital in Japan for about 2 weeks in September 2002, and I'm recording this in September 2024. So it's almost exactly 22 years ago. And so that's what I'm going to do. Now, a lot of listeners, long-term listeners, you'll be familiar with this story. You've heard me talk about this experience of being sick in Japan. I've told the story a few times, maybe, 2 or 3 times on this podcast before, several episodes. One where I was just in my room describing the story. Another one when I told the story in front of an audience at the British Council and made a podcast episode about it. And so here we go again. And for some reason, I just can't seem to stop telling this story. But the reason I'm doing it again is because, I kind of rediscovered these diaries. So I took diaries. I wrote a diary while I was in the hospital describing what was going on each day and how I felt and what I was thinking. And it's pretty much every single day of my stay there is recorded. I think I lost track of the days, and I'm not sure I wrote... I think it's every day, maybe not, I'm not sure. But anyway, what I thought I'd do is actually read through the diary and share it with you. Now, I'm not completely sure how this episode will go, if I'm honest with you. I don't know. Maybe this is going to be very interesting. Maybe it won't be. I have no idea, really. But I thought that I would just at least record it and see how it goes. And maybe I'll never publish this. Maybe if I decide that it's just not really that interesting, I won't publish it. But obviously, if you are listening to this, it means that I have decided to publish it. But anyway, we'll see. We'll see. What are some things I wanted to say about this? So I've told this story lots of times before. I found these diaries the other day. I thought it could be interesting to revisit what happened and read what I actually wrote at the time. So I ended up in a hospital in Japan. You'll get the details of why and how and stuff. And I spent 2 weeks there. But in the end, luckily, it wasn't serious. It wasn't too serious. But I didn't know that at the time. And when I first went into the hospital, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I felt absolutely terrible, and I didn't really understand what the problem was. I didn't really know what was going on around me. In the hospital, I was pretty much almost the only non-Japanese person in the hospital. At that time, people didn't really speak English. People just didn't really speak English in the hospital. And my Japanese wasn't very good. So I was really kind of lost and had no idea what was going on, certainly the first couple of days. And as well as feeling physically terrible, I was completely exhausted. My whole body was aching. My head was pounding. I couldn't eat because it was far too painful in my throat. So as well as feeling so terrible, I also had stomach issues which you don't want to know about. As well as all those things, as well as feeling completely horrible, I was frankly terrified as well. You'll get the details about why. So on the first night in the hospital, I remember just lying in the bed, trying my best not to panic. I was having really bad panic attacks because obviously I wasn't physically in a very good state, and it can be hard to relax when you are unwell. You know, it can be hard to kind of feel comfortable and to relax. And as I said, I was also very scared, so I kept having these horrible panic attacks. I was very stressed out. I thought that I might be seriously ill or something. I thought that they were going to operate on me. This is what I was thinking, that they were going to give me an operation. So I was panicking, you know, and having sort of horrible panic attacks. Couldn't relax. I knew I just needed to rest. And just out of a sense of survival, I had to try to calm myself down and not panic and find ways to keep my mind occupied. And then I ended up spending quite a lot of time in this hospital. And yeah, I found that I had to write a diary. And I managed to buy notepads from the little shop they had in the hospital. And I quickly began scribbling down a lot of the things that were going on and that I was thinking about. As I said before, in the end, it wasn't that bad. And I'm very thankful that I wasn't too ill. And it does make me think of people who are seriously ill and in hospital and what that must be like. I was actually quite lucky because after about a day, I found out what it actually was, what was wrong with me. And I realised it wasn't as serious as I had worried. And then it was really just a case of getting plenty of rest. And then, you know, that's what I did. And then I just had this very strange experience of being almost the only non-Japanese person in this massive hospital on the other side of the world. It turned into a very strange 2 weeks and a period that I often think about. Thinking about it, it was a sort of breakdown and recovery, I suppose. Anyway, what happened? What was I thinking about at the time? Well, let's read the diary and find out. As I said before, I hope this is going to be interesting and not just too self-indulgent. Now, one thing, often when I do my episodes, I make the text available. If I write everything in advance, if I write notes or scripts in advance, I make that text available, either on the screen if you're watching the video version or on the website. In this case, for this episode, there isn't really time for me to write out everything from these diaries. There isn't really time for me to transcribe it all and write it all out and then give you a PDF of it. Also, these are, you know, just my diaries, so I don't necessarily want to make them freely available, even though I'm going to read them out. Anyway, let's just say there isn't really time for me to type these out. Also, don't really want to take photographs of every single page and put them up. So in this case, there won't be text on the screen. You're not going to be able to read the words that I'm actually saying in this episode. So you'll just have to focus on the spoken word without relying on the written word this time. I think this is actually very good for your listening, because if you think about it, when you listen in normal life, you don't get the text. You don't get a transcript of what you're listening to. So I encourage you just simply to focus on the words that you're hearing and just hopefully get absorbed in the things I'm saying and just try to follow what you are listening to. This is a listening exercise, let's say. I will explain bits and pieces of English that come up during the episode. Essentially, we will be learning English from me 22 years ago. And, you know, when I was writing this diary, I was just completely being myself. And so certain bits of like vocabulary came up that kind of could be interesting for you to learn. So I'll explain some bits of vocab. When this happened, I was in my mid-20s at the time. My mid-20s, I'd been to university, I'd lived away from home already for a few years. But nevertheless, I still think, from this perspective now, I think I wasn't very mature, really. I mean, I was fairly mature in my mind, I think, But in terms of the practicalities of life, like being able to look after yourself and being able to, just cook and do all those things, I think I wasn't very grown up still. And that's maybe one of the reasons why I ended up in this state, that I wasn't really looking after myself very well. Now, I think it's probably time for me to just start reading from the diaries, and we'll see where we go. I'm not going to read out every single thing I've written in here, because some of this is just too personal for me to share. So I will be, let's say, skipping over certain things and maybe redacting certain details. But I'll read most of it to you, I think. All right? So if you're sitting comfortably or standing comfortably or whatever, let's begin. So this is my hospital diary, and the two of them. The first one was written on this lovely sort of turquoise, pale blue, greenish coloured pad that I bought in the hospital shop. And it starts like this: Luke's Japanese hospital diary, starting from the back. So I actually decided that I would write from the back to the front, just for the hell of it, and also out of respect for my host nation, Japan. I suppose that's kind of how I was feeling. Normally I would have just, normally in where I'm from, page 1 is the, you get the idea. So I decided I'd write back to front. So, day 1. Well, what the hell am I doing here? I'm in a hospital in Japan. How did this happen? Well, I dunno. I dunno means I don't know. I dunno, and I can't be asked to think about it now. If you can't be asked to do something, that's asked. A-R-S-E-D. Can't be asked means you can't be bothered. You just feel like you don't have enough energy, or you're too lazy. So, how did this happen? How did I end up in this place? Well, I can't be asked to think about it now. It's an informal expression. It's a little bit rude. Just means I can't be bothered to think about it. I've just been filled with strange pink liquid, and I'm feeling a little sleepy, so I think I'll tackle the whole "why am I here" problem a bit later. Still, it's highly strange. So I'd been filled with a strange pink liquid. That was... I don't really know what it was. Someone in the comments section of one of my old episodes did explain to me what that was when I described it before, but in the hospital, part of the treatment is that they would hook me up to this IV drip at regular intervals. I'd get a couple of these every day, and the pink one was a kind of see-through pink liquid, right? A big bag of it. I don't know how much it was, but it was quite large, and it would take a few hours for it all to go into me. So I had a little thing attached to one of the veins on my left hand. It was like a little metal spike that went into the vein on my left hand. I think it was on the vein on my hand, and that's where they would attach the drip, and then there would be this kind of like metal. Sort of metal stand with wheels on it, and then a hook at the top, and then this plastic sack with this mysterious see-through pink liquid hanging from it, and then a little tube coming down which would be attached to this thing on my hand, and they'd open up the thing on my hand, the catheter, right? They'd open up that and open up the bag, and the stuff would just slowly make its way into my blood, into my body. So yeah. So I've just been filled with this strange pink liquid, and I'm feeling a little sleepy, so I think I'll tackle the whole "why am I here" problem a bit later. If you tackle a problem, it just means you deal with it. A bit like in football, if you tackle someone, you try and get the ball from them. You can also tackle a problem, meaning deal with it. Okay, it's a bit later, about 2 p.m, and I still feel drowsy, meaning sleepy, but I don't want to sleep now. I'd rather leave that for later. Also, I want to stay awake, because I'll have to go downstairs to get a call from Mum and Dad on my mobile, which has to stay switched off up here. So bear in mind, everyone, that this happened in 2002, which is before the days of like smartphones. And I mean, we had the internet, but the internet was not quite as pervasive, meaning everywhere, as it is today. And I had a little flip phone, a little J phone, which allowed me to make phone calls and send SMS text messages. But I wasn't on the internet. I didn't have any of the things that we have today. I didn't have access to the internet. I wasn't on YouTube, no social media. None of that stuff that would, these days, probably have kept me distracted and kept me entertained. I had none of that. So it was just me in a bed with kind of nothing. I did get some books. I did get some mini discs and a mini disc player so I could listen to music. But a lot of the time, I was just sitting there, completely bored, just with my own thoughts. So I said I had to go downstairs to get a phone call from my mum and dad on my mobile. So I'll continue. I must say this hospital is very relaxing. There isn't really anything for me to do except sleep and daydream, which is a nice change from my usual Saturday spent in Nova, rushing around without a moment to plan each lesson. So I used to work in Japan. I used to work for this company called Nova, which was a language school. I think they don't exist anymore. I think they went bankrupt. So Nova was a very well-known language school. As a brand, it was as well-known as probably McDonald's or something like that. And, you know, you would see Nova language schools, English schools just everywhere in Japan. All the major cities, all the major stations had a Nova next to them. And not the best reputation. It was kind of like, you know, what McDonald's did for food, Nova did for learning English, something like that. But there were lots of jobs for at Nova. A lot of people like me would go and work at Nova. It was easy to get a job there, pretty much. I mean, they had standards. You know, they had high standards. Anyway, so working at Nova was quite hard work. You would have to work very hard, teaching fairly long days, very intensive teaching all the way through the day. I've talked about it before, the routine of coming into work, not knowing exactly what your teaching program would be for that day, looking at the program which would be put on the board maybe just half an hour before the day starts. And you'd have a look. You wouldn't really have much time to prepare your lessons. You'd be rushing into the classroom, teaching maybe 50 minutes with a small group of Japanese people, often quite unprepared. And then when the lesson finished, you'd have 10 minutes to do the quick lesson report, giving notes for each student, put the files back, find the names of the students in your next class, which was going to start within just a few minutes, grab their files, work out which lessons they needed to do, find the relevant course books, have a look at the pages, quickly prepare something in like a minute or two, and then rush into the classroom and start the next lesson. And you'd have about 9 lessons like that, back to back, with a lunch break. And often at least one of those lessons would be a kids' class, where you'd rush downstairs and suddenly you're teaching like 8 little kids. So very intensive teaching. Great kind of training for me, but the work was quite intensive. So anyway, it was a nice change sitting in this hospital bed on this Saturday when normally I would be rushing around without a moment to plan each lesson. So the diary continues. I still can't escape that feeling of I'm sick. It's a little dark cloud hanging over me. My body isn't working properly and it's become dangerous, so I've been put in this place to get special treatment. I never expected this. It's quite an experience. I arrived yesterday after what is already a long story, which I'll cut short here. So this is a kind of like quick summary of the story. So the summer was too hot and too humid. I was also very busy and I exhausted myself, I think. My girlfriend, so that's a Japanese girlfriend I had at the time. She was Japanese. Her dad was like half American. Her family were lovely. Not that I really met them very much. In fact, I met her dad because I was sick, and that was embarrassing, I have to say. I'll probably get to that in a bit. But I met her mum once or twice. Lovely family, lovely girl, and But when I got sick, they were all out of the country. And so, like, the only people who perhaps I could have asked for help weren't there. There was the company, there was the school I worked for, but for me, I didn't feel like they were someone I could turn to, because really, I would just call them to tell them I was sick so I didn't have to work. And then, on a personal level, it was probably my girlfriend who was the one who would perhaps be the Japanese person that I would look to for help. I had another couple of Japanese friends as well, but anyway, so my girlfriend went on holiday to the UK, ironically enough, and I came down with a strange fever. I had to work an 8-day week. That's working 8 days consecutively without a day off. And for most of that time, I was feeling under the weather. So if you feel under the weather, it just means you feel kind of sick. My nightmare kids class, so that's a kids class that I had to teach that was a total nightmare, and they used to completely exhaust me and I couldn't control them. And it was just, I used to dread going into that class. My nightmare kids class also took its toll. If something takes its toll, it means it's sort of like, you kind of have to pay for it. It takes something from you. It takes your energy away, or it somehow, takes something from you. A toll is normally a payment that you have to make to use a certain road. So to travel down this road, you have to pay a toll. So if something takes its toll on you, we use the preposition on, take its toll on you. It means basically that it takes something from you. Normally it makes you tired. So my nightmare kids class also took its toll. I got to my 3-day weekend, so that's after 8 days of feeling terrible because I was sick with something, and the teaching in this way for 8 days straight, and it was still very hot and humid. This is kind of near the end of a Japanese summer, and summers in Japan, in the area where I was living, Kanagawa Prefecture, not far from Tokyo, the temperature gets very hot and it's very humid. So I got to my 3-day weekend and spent it lying in bed, recovering from flu / fever. So I thought that I had influenza. And those are the symptoms I had. I was just very tired. I remember my back aching so much. I didn't have the energy to do anything. I could only lie down in bed, and my back had this kind of really horrible, deep aching feeling in it, especially up at the top and across my shoulders, like deep sort of aching tiredness. It was horrible. I also took a day off sick the previous week. I guess that's before the 8-day week. That's why I had to work an 8-day week. And by Wednesday, that was my 3rd day of weekend, 3rd day of lying down in bed trying to rest. By the 3rd day off, I was feeling a bit better, and I decided I would go out, that it would be a good idea for me to get out of the apartment and maybe go for a walk or something. And I went out to Kamakura, which was a place near where I used to live that had lots of nice places to go walking with interesting old Japanese temples. So I went out for a walk in Kamakura, and coincidentally enough, while I was walking around one of those temples, I happened to bump into Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters and Nirvana, the drummer from Nirvana, Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters. I happened to meet him by coincidence, which was kind of an extraordinary moment for me. And I was just leaving one of these temples, and I saw a group of like foreign people. When I say foreign people, I mean non-Japanese people, which is at that time was still quite rare. You didn't see that many foreign people, even in a touristy place like that. And so when I saw foreigners, I'd sometimes just kind of like, even sometimes you'd say hello, or you just at least have a look at them. To kind of maybe guess where they come from or something. And I remember walking past this group, and there was the person at the front of the group. I kind of took a look at him, and I thought, funny, I know him. I'm sure I know him. And I kept walking because I was trying to keep myself to myself. I kept walking, and then after a few steps I realised, oh my God, that's Dave Grohl. And I was a big fan. I mean, I still am. But certainly just like maybe the year before, I'd spent kind of a year on my own and living at my parents' in the countryside. I say living on my own, I was living with my parents, but it was a very quiet year, kind of year of a lot of solitude, of kind of working in a job I wasn't really enjoying and spending a lot of time on my own. All my other friends had all, were all living in different places after having been at university, and I ended up sort of on my own and spent a lot of time driving around in my dad's car. And I had this tape, which was this Foo Fighters album, There's Nothing Left to Lose, and I would just, for some reason, this particular album was the album I listened to all the time in the car, and it made me feel comfortable. One of those comfortable albums that you listen to that kind of makes you feel better. It was one of those periods. So there I was in Japan, and then working as an English teacher, my first English teaching job. And then, this weird day when I went for a walk, and suddenly there's Dave Grohl. It was just so weird, and I talked to him and stuff. I went back to work on the Thursday and the Friday and Saturday and Sunday. By the Saturday, I could feel the illness coming back. On Sunday, I knew it was tonsillitis. So tonsillitis is an infection of glands in your throat. And the glands, the tonsils at the back of your throat, they get swollen. And when it gets bad, they get really infected. And you can actually see the bacterial infection on the tonsils. They kind of change colour. They swell up and they become incredibly painful. Now, I thought it was maybe just tonsillitis, but it was not. I didn't only have tonsillitis. So on Sunday, I knew it was tonsillitis. I could feel the pain in my throat. I looked at them in the mirror. I could see that they were swollen. My girlfriend, I think, came back from her holiday with her family around this time. And on the Sunday night, I managed to arrange with her to see a doctor the next day, which was my day off. And I absolutely had to see a doctor because it felt terrible. And I was already, now I've written in this diary, I was shitting myself. And that's obviously a rude expression that just means I was really scared. So I felt so bad and I was really scared. Now, tonsillitis is, it's not that bad. But if you leave it and it doesn't get treated, then it can lead to more serious things. First of all, it can get so bad, the infection in your tonsils can get so bad that it can lead to what's called abscesses. These are huge, like holes in this case, it would be holes in my throat that were deeply infected. And that would be very, very, very painful. And then any infection in your body, if you don't deal with it, then the infection can move to different parts of the body. And ultimately, the infection could move into your blood. And if your blood gets infected, that's called sepsis, and that is life-threatening. So, I mean, that's what would happen eventually. But luckily, I was living in a place where there were doctors and medicine and stuff like that. But I still felt, very alienated as a foreigner in this country. And I'd only been there for a few months, really, at this time. Maybe 6 or 7 months. 7 or 8 months. No, 9 months. Anyway, I arrived in January of that year. So I hadn't even been there for a year. And I still felt very alienated and kind of helpless. I had no idea how to arrange a doctor's appointment. Nothing like that. And remember, there's no internet, really. I didn't have a computer at home. So I couldn't just log onto the internet and just Google it. That was not an option. So I had to rely on other people, and so anyway, I had to get my girlfriend to help me arrange a doctor's appointment. And that was for the next day, the Monday, and I had to because it felt terrible, and already I was shitting myself. Monday was a national holiday, which means everything is closed. So my girlfriend's mum and dad had to take me to an emergency clinic. The whole experience was totally upsetting and the start of one of my worst weeks. So I remember I looked like a zombie. I felt terrible. I looked awful. And this was the first time I met my girlfriend's dad. And I just felt so ashamed and embarrassed. And I felt like he must have thought, who the hell is this guy? I mean, I've got to say a big thank you to my girlfriend and her family. I don't know if they're watching. I mean, you know, we didn't, it wasn't like that serious. We weren't even in that much of a serious relationship. We'd only been seeing each other for a couple of months, maybe. And then suddenly, like, her and her family are having to look after me. So I have to say a big thanks to them so much. I doubt that they're listening to this, but in any case, I don't know if I ever showed my gratitude, really. I don't know if I don't remember. I must have done. I must have said a big thank you. Maybe I bought flowers. I don't remember, but still, I would really like to show my gratitude to them because they really helped me. So the whole experience was totally upsetting. Start of one of my worst weeks. I was very frightened because I'd never been ill seriously in Japan before, and I was in a lot of pain, and everyone around me was speaking another language, so I really didn't know what was happening. Luckily, my girlfriend's mum and dad speak good English and helped me. The doctor was very scary. I sat in an upright examining chair, and the whole vibe was very old-fashioned. Yeah, I remember this. Sitting in like this upright chair with like a neck brace, or my neck was like in this kind of brace thing, which holds your neck and head in position. Very uncomfortable upright chair. I sat in the chair, and to my left, there was like a kind of a table or a cabinet on my left. And in the cabinet were all his tools, which really scared me. I could see all these different knives and instruments and all these different tools. All were just there right next to me, and I could see them. And that really scared me, just looking at all those knives and blades and things and scalpels. And there was a big light in my face, and the nurse was wandering around behind me. I felt like there was no real effort to make the patient feel relaxed. In my experience in England in those situations, normally there's a sort of bedside manner, which is like a kind of some level of effort to try and make the patient feel a bit comfortable and relaxed. In this particular doctor's surgery, I didn't get that at all, and my overall feeling, not understanding what they were talking about, my overall feeling was a very unfriendly atmosphere. No effort to make me feel relaxed or comfortable. He put antiseptic on a swab. So a swab was like a kind of, first of all, a long metal rod, like a long metal stick, and on the end of it was like a soft piece of fabric, which he dipped into some antiseptic. Antiseptic is stuff that you would put on like an injury or a cut to try and kill bacteria. So he got this long metal rod with this swab on the end. He dipped it into this antiseptic, and he poked it right into my throat and directly cleaned my tonsils. Now, bear in mind at the time, my tonsils were hugely swollen, incredibly sensitive, and not just covered in grey bacteria, but it got so bad that I remember looking in the mirror, and it was the bacteria's grey-green colour all over my tonsils, and they were starting to go black as well. It was the worst tonsillitis I'd ever had, and I've had tonsillitis quite a lot of times in my life. And it was so bad that the tonsils were even starting to go black. And so his solution was just to just directly clean them, rub them with this antiseptic. It was very painful. He also sprayed them a fair amount. So psh, 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 psh. He sprayed them with antiseptics, and that caused me even more pain. At one moment, I remember I coughed. I involuntarily coughed this stuff back into his face. It was horrible. So he's there with this thing, like rubbing my tonsils and spraying them, and I kind of went, I couldn't help it, and it coughed it all back into his face. I felt so terrible. It was awful because, what you want to be able to do is say, oh, God, I'm so sorry. But I just was unable to do that. And at this point, I was holding back tears. So I was actually trying not to cry. I felt so awful in every way. I felt physically awful. Also socially, just felt so ashamed as well. So I left the emergency ward or the emergency clinic with 4 pills of antibiotics. And the night before, I had been praying for antibiotics. He gave me 4 pills, which as far as I could tell was about a day's worth. Now, I'd had tonsillitis quite a lot of times before this particular moment. To be honest, I should have had them removed, but I never got that done. I should have had them removed, but in my late teens and early 20s, I got tonsillitis quite a lot of times. And I was always given a course of antibiotics that would last maybe 5 days. And that would stop the tonsillitis and they'd go back to normal and I'd just carry on, feel better. So I knew how much antibiotics I needed. And it was always the same. Whenever I had tonsillitis, I would take antibiotics for a couple of days and it wouldn't make any difference for maybe 2 days. And it wasn't until the 3rd day that it would kick in and I would definitely feel that the infection was going. And then by 5 days later, I'd feel completely better again. This guy gave me 4 pills, which was supposed to be like a day or 2 of antibiotics, and they weren't big pills either. So he gave me some antibiotics and some mouthwash. My girlfriend's parents were mega helpful. I got the train back from Zushi. That was the place where I went to the doctors. That's also the place I used to work. Spent Monday feeling terrible. The antibiotics didn't do anything. I remember, because my throat was so horribly infected and so painful, I couldn't eat. I couldn't really eat anything. I tried to eat some mouthfuls of banana and I tried to drink miso soup, but that's pretty much it. It was just too painful to eat. Even just drinking water and staying hydrated was horribly painful. On Tuesday, I went back to that doctor at his own surgery with my girlfriend this time, so he could examine me again and give me more antibiotics. I was feeling super crap, like feeling really bad. I got back on Tuesday and couldn't eat because of pain. The doctor gave me painkillers that didn't kill pain and antibiotics that didn't do whatever they're supposed to do. Very upsetting. Spent 2 days feeling really miserable. At this point, I was just really miserable and just really wanted just to be home. I just wanted to be out of this shitty little room where I was living. Just the outside world at that point where I was just seemed so foreign to me and so uninviting. I just really wanted to be home, but I was miles away. I was like a 12-hour plane journey, which, is like £1,000 ticket, which the money I didn't have. I felt very far from home, and all I wanted to do was just to be home. So I spent 2 days feeling really miserable. A Thursday, I met my girlfriend's mum, and we decided to go to a different doctor. Okay, so this is the 3rd attempt, really, to get this dealt with. This new doctor turned out to be one of my students. So I went to this doctor in this town called Zushi and went into the doctor's surgery, waited and stuff, and went in, and surprise, surprise, it's one of my students. And I had a lot of students who lived in that town who would go and have English lessons, for example, maybe with me on a Saturday morning or something. And so he was one of my students, which was pretty good because he was more friendly and we could communicate better. The other doctor I mentioned was really unfriendly and seemed like a kind of, I don't know if he was cruel and mean, but I felt like that. I felt like he never really looked at me like a person. I was just a thing in front of him. Whereas this other doctor was way more friendly and already knew me as his teacher. And I felt like we could communicate better. Although having said that, he was A2 level. So that means he was kind of elementary, pre-intermediate level in English. So his English was quite basic. But still, just the fact that I knew him and he was nice, a nice guy, made a huge difference. He diagnosed me with acute tonsillitis. Acute tonsillitis, that means very, like advanced tonsillitis. Which makes it sound good, like C1 level tonsillitis. But like basically very bad tonsillitis. Your tonsils, remember those glands at the back of your throat. Itis often is a suffix that's added meaning an infection, right? So in this case, tonsillitis, an infection of the tonsils. Laryngitis, for example, an infection of the larynx, another part of your throat. So he diagnosed me with acute tonsillitis and put me on an antibiotic drip for 30 minutes. So I remember I lay down in a room in his surgery while this little bag of antibiotics dripped into my arm for about 30 minutes. And he gave me good painkillers and better antibiotics. He also took a blood test. Now, the doctor had diagnosed me with having tonsillitis, but that wasn't the only thing I had. I think the tonsillitis was maybe a consequence of this other thing that I had. After the drip, I felt better, and a lot of the pain in my tonsils went, and I could actually eat more. Now, the next day was Friday, which is yesterday. So the day before I wrote this stuff. So this was written on a Saturday. Day 1, let's say, or maybe day 2 was a Saturday. And so the day before, I went back to see the new doctor with my girlfriend, and he gave me the results of my blood test. And this bit was really scary because, and this was where there was a bit of a miscommunication and a bit of a misunderstanding, which caused me to be very upset. So he gave me the results of my blood test. He said I had liver damage and a high level of white blood cells, and I had the EB virus. I had no idea what the EB virus is. And when writing this, I wrote, "What the hell is that?" I wrote. And that I'd need an operation. So I remember distinctly, he said, "Here's your liver damage. Your liver is a really important organ in your body, which helps to filter all the blood in your body, and it breaks down poisonous substances in your body." Now, because I had this infection, a lot of that infection was in my blood. Now, my blood wasn't infected; it was my throat that was infected. But a lot of the result of that infection meant that my blood needed to be cleaned. A lot of the white blood cells, which are there to try to fight against the infection, those white blood cells can actually still be very damaging to your body as well. And your liver has to do a lot of the work of trying to essentially clean up your blood. And so your liver gets damaged in this situation. And I had sort of quite a high level of liver damage, which was very worrying because I knew that the liver was one of the most important organs in the body. So he said, "You've got liver damage, you have a high level of white blood cells." He was like, "Here's the normal level, and here's your level," and it seemed to be much higher than it should be. And I had the EB virus. And I remember at the time thinking, what on earth is the EB virus? And I was terrified. I thought it was one of those horrible sort of tropical diseases or something like that. I didn't know. And he said, "You will need to go to a hospital and you will need an operation." And at that point, all the blood drained from my face, and I think I just instantly burst out crying or something because I was so exhausted. It was like the culmination of so many horrible, horrible days and feeling so tired and desperate and exhausted. And when he told me all those things, I suddenly decided or assumed that actually I was really, really ill. And, I don't know, you kind of hold on. And then when someone tells you that, I don't know. I sort of like assumed the worst or something. I was very upset, and again, it was a misunderstanding, kind of, which I'll explain in a bit. So this was the worst news for me. I think he may have made it sound more serious than it really is, but I will be in hospital for a week. Turns out I was there for longer. For me, the liver damage and the hospital bits were the scariest. I expected him to tell me I was getting better and I'd be fine in a couple of weeks. But that's not what he said. Anyway, I checked into this hospital, which is okay because I'm being looked after and I'm not all alone in my apartment, shitting myself, again, meaning feeling really scared, and speculating about everything more later. So yeah, the fact that I was in hospital was a good thing because, finally I was in a place where I could be looked after, right? Much better than being on my own in my apartment where I was speculating about everything, meaning my imagination was running riot, getting carried away, getting scared and stuff. So it felt good to be in a hospital, but still. So I arrived yesterday, and first I had to see the hospital doctor, who is a pretty cool dude, a young guy with a sense of humour. He checked out my tonsils, cleaned up my nose, etc. Also, I had an X-ray, no problem, and a cardiogram. That's kind of like that's when they check your heart. I had a cardiogram which showed that I was having a few irregularities in that department due to stress and nerves. So I mentioned before I was having panic attacks. I could feel like heart palpitations, like an irregular heartbeat. So I'm just staying chilled out. So I was just trying to chill out and just trying to relax. My girlfriend stayed with me last night while I ate my dinner and then left when her parents arrived with my stuff. I don't know where they got my stuff from. Her dad has even given me a pair of slippers. Wow, they were so nice. Skip past that bit. After my girlfriend and her parents left, the nurse hooked me up to another drip, my first in the hospital, one bag of antibiotics and one with vitamins and other things to make my throat and tonsils feel better. The drip was weird and slow. It lasted about 4 hours. It's a kind of horrible feeling having all this fluid dripping right into your body. I can taste it too. And it's all in my snot and saliva. So I could actually kind of taste. It was very weird. It was obviously going into my bloodstream, but I felt it was all in my body everywhere, and I could taste it in my mouth. I had this weird taste in my mouth, and it was in my snot. That's like the green stuff that comes out of your nose, and in my saliva. And even I felt like my fingernails were kind of greasy. It's really, really weird. Still, I expect it's making me better. Right. I have to go downstairs now to get that phone call, then back up here for another drip. Wahey, the party never stops. So somehow I'd communicated a little bit with my parents, and I think my girlfriend's mum was also in communication with my parents, which is also weird because it's like normally, you don't introduce your girlfriend's parents to each other until you get like really serious, and we weren't really that serious, so it was all a bit much for us. So okay, I continued. I finished the drip. I'm full of antibiotics again. I got the phone call from home too. Everything seems pretty calm there. So I had been in touch with my parents while feeling sick, and they were trying to, comfort me and stuff. But they didn't know what was up. And but I think that maybe my girlfriend's mum had been telling my parents what it was, and my girlfriend's mum was the one who knew what was going on. I didn't really know what was going on. Anyway, so it was actually my parents who told me. So I'm continuing to read. They told me I've got glandular fever, and that I'm actually in the right kind. I'm getting the right kind of care. This makes me feel a bit better, knowing that I've got a common thing, or popular virus, as one of the doctors said this week. My student, actually. I'll have to set him straight on that when I see him next. So it turned out I had glandular fever, which is also known as mononucleosis. Yes, a very common thing which loads of people, especially sort of people in their teens or early 20s, often get. It's a common virus which causes exhaustion, and it can lead to things like tonsillitis. So that was actually very reassuring because I knew that it wasn't that serious and it was actually very common. Now, mononucleosis can be, you can get it badly, you can get it less badly. Some people get mononucleosis and maybe they just sort of have to rest for a few days and then they carry on fine. Other people get glandular fever or mononucleosis and it's a bit stronger and it affects them a bit more. And for some people, they get it and it really knocks them out for quite a long time. And it can be weeks of rest that you need. And some people, you get the feeling you never really quite recover from it, that there's always this lingering feeling of tiredness that stays with you, or that you feel the symptoms of it come back every now and then. And that's kind of how it was for me. It took me quite a long time to recover from this mononucleosis, and I felt low energy for quite a long time afterwards. Even for like a year, the following year, I kind of go up and down, and sometimes I would feel it had come back, and I'd feel that sense of deep tiredness again. And even to this day, it comes back to me, and I get that feeling. So after having mononucleosis, I used to get migraine headaches, and these headaches would come and be incredibly powerful headaches, which would make it very difficult for me to do things. Moving around would make my head pound. Bright light would be really, really difficult to look at. And still to this day, I periodically get these migraines where, it's just a headache that stays with you for a long time, accompanied by that kind of weird sense of tiredness. And I remember I used to get like aches and pains in the back of my head, and it was very disturbing. So going back to the misunderstanding from my doctor, he said, so the thing about the liver damage was correct. The EB virus is actually the virus that causes mononucleosis. It's called the Epstein-Barr virus. It's the cause of mononucleosis. Then you will need to go to a hospital, meant that you should go and you need to go and rest. You need to be given care because you're really not okay. You can't stay at home. You've got to be looked after for a while. You need at least a week in hospital. So that's what that was, for rest. And then you will need an operation. What I was worried about, I was thinking I'm going to need a liver transplant. That's what I was thinking. That they're going to operate on me. They're going to remove my liver, which has got this weird damage and this problem, and I'm going to be given a new liver. And one of the crazy things that I was worried about was that I'd be given a Japanese liver. And I don't know what, when you're in that state, you kind of worry. You kind of think, would a Japanese liver work? Would that work for me? I know it's just it's the human body and stuff, and it's just a liver is a liver, but I was kind of worried, thinking, how's that going to be, having a Japanese liver? And then I used to think, would that mean that I'd still be able to drink? Because some Japanese people, it's every, I don't know what the ratio is, but okay, sometimes you go to a bar in Japan and having a few drinks, and there'd always be one Japanese person who'd have one or two drinks, and they'd go all red in the face and they'd fall over and pass out because they lacked a certain enzyme, which meant they couldn't break down the alcohol, and they'd get really badly affected by the alcohol. I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get that guy's liver, aren't I, knowing my luck? So all these sort of stupid things were flying around my head. But what the doctor actually meant was you should have your liver, you should have your tonsils removed. That's the operation he was talking about, is that at some point you should have your tonsils removed, because it seems that they can be infected quite easily. I never did get my tonsils removed, and I still got tonsillitis occasionally for years after that. These days, I don't get it so much anymore. But probably should get them removed. But, when you're busy, you don't always have time to get all these things done. Let's continue the diary. Is this interesting? I hope so. There's more. I should fly through this more quickly. I sent an email to Azusa. That was a friend of mine. I was in a band with her. I was playing drums. Azusa was the bass player. Sent an email to Azusa saying I won't be able to make it to band practice and to tell Yusuke. Yusuke was the other guy in the band. I hope she does and that they work something out with this new singer who I'm really interested in meeting. It turns out, looks like we were looking at having a new singer in the band. It should be pretty interesting with 2 girls and 2 guys in the band, and me and Yusuke have been hitting it off well recently. Hitting it off meaning getting on well. Sort of having a good relationship recently. Blah, blah, blah. I've got plenty more to write, but dinner is on its way and I can't really write a lot in one go anyway. More later. Now, I remember that morning, the first morning, I didn't write this in the diary, but I remember this. That first morning, I kind of woke up after a bad night where I hadn't slept very well. I woke up in the morning in this hospital, and one of the first things that happened is that a nurse came to me with a sort of questionnaire, and the questions had been translated into English, and she read out the English questions, but the translation was really bad, and the questions didn't make much sense to me, so I tried to answer them as well as I could. She asked me about how I'd slept and how I felt and stuff, and one of the questions was, what were your movements last night? Or can you describe your movements last night? And I thought she meant like how much I had moved in bed during the night, like my body position or something. So that's what I thought she was talking about. So I was like, well, and I tried to explain. I was like, maybe 2 hours on this side, maybe an hour like this, maybe a few hours on this side. But I turned, lots of turning in bed. And she looked at me and she sort of went, and wrote something down. And later what I realised is what that meant was, what were your bowel movements last night? Because actually, when I went to the hospital, as well as all the other things, I also had diarrhea. So bowel movements means doing poo, okay? Your bowels are part of your bum. And when you move your bowels, it means when poo comes out of your bum. Okay, that's a bowel movement. It's a poo. So she wanted to know about the condition of my poo, and how many times I had done a poo last night because I had diarrhea. So what she thought she was asking me was, can you describe your poo last night? And my response was, well, a couple of hours on this side, a couple of hours on that side, and lay on my back for a while. She must have thought I was completely mad or something. I don't know. So I continue the diary. It's about 7 p.m. now, and I've finished dinner, taken all my medicine. I've got tons of stuff to take. 1 antibiotic, 1 little cup of painkiller from a bottle. It looks like milk, but it tastes of lemon. 1 pill for my blocked nose, a sachet of stuff to stop diarrhea. Also, I have some little throat sweets, which taste of strawberry and are nice to suck, and some mouthwash for gargling. So I had like a whole collection of medicine on the side of on the bedside table. I've been just communicating with a few words, like finished, okay, call, daijobu, itai, chotto. This is weird. So daijobu is basically like okay, right? Feeling okay, or okay. Itai means it hurts. Chotto means a little bit. The guy opposite me, so I was in a ward, a room in the hospital, with about probably 8 beds in it, something like that. I was in 1 bed in the corner of the room, next to the window, luckily, but there were about 7 other beds in the room. 1 opposite me, 1 right next to me. So the guy opposite me is watching the baseball, and I keep sneaking glances at his TV. So I kept sort of having a look at his television, watching the baseball. I've got a TV too, but I need a card to get it working, and I can't be asked to get it. I can't be asked to get one. I should, though, check out the baseball and stuff. I'm a bit bored now, which isn't good. I think getting that TV card is the right thing for me to do. I never actually did get the TV card. And I've written next. I couldn't get a TV card. No change. I didn't have any money. Doesn't matter. I'll have to find another way to amuse myself. I was able to walk around the hospital a bit. And I wrote, walking around this place, there are some really ill people about. People in wheelchairs, very old women, really weak, lying in a bed. People towing frames that carry bags of their urine and drips. So there were people walking around sort of like with these metal frames, and they were dragging the frames along on little wheels, and the frames seemed to carry bags of their urine. It's really weird. In the toilet there is a rack with loads of really stinky bags of urine hanging from it. So you'd go into the toilet and on the side there'd be all these bags of yellow urine hanging up, and it would sort of smelt really bad. I said, bad smell, but these people are sick. I'm really the odd one out here. I'm young, I'm not too sick, and I'm English. The place is filled with old Japanese people. What am I doing here? How did I get to be here doing this? It's ridiculous and funny. I'm just alone with my thoughts, but I'm keeping myself amused. I can't push myself here, so I'm just playing dumb games to pass the time. I just really wanted to try and not to challenge myself mentally or physically in any way. Right, I just felt like I was just recovering from this horrible mental condition as well as physical. So I can't push myself here, so I'm just playing dumb games to pass the time. Last night I spent a lot of time playing the ABC game. Basically, I think of a topic, however ordinary or stupid, and think of a word associated it for each letter of the alphabet, with some dumbass results. For example, animals. You just go through the entire alphabet thinking of an animal that begins with A, then B. A, anaconda. B, bear. C, crocodile. D, duck. You know, and you just keep doing it. You try not to think too much. It just keeps your mind occupied so that you don't completely panic or get really depressed or something like that. Animals, easy. Movie names, places or objects in movies. Characters in movies, food, sports, pastimes, art forms, forms or genres of music, musical instruments, musical sounds on a Yamaha keyboard, bands, songs, Beatles songs, place names, boys' names, girls' names, different feelings, etc., etc., etc. And I would just keep playing that in order to make sure that my mind didn't start thinking about other things and getting sort of scared or upset. I always get stuck on K and Q because I can only think of zoo. I always get stuck on K and Q, so I could never think of words beginning with K and words beginning with Q especially. And because I can only think of zoo and zebra for Z, I have to incorporate these into every category somehow. For example, sports, you got like zebra racing. Pastimes, zoo, going to the. Art forms, zoo painting. Musical genres, Zimbabwe music. Sounds, general zoo noise or zebra neigh, etc., etc. You get the picture. A nurse has arrived and I know ... So a nurse arrived and I said, I know, meaning I know she's going to do something, and I stopped writing. And then after she'd gone, I continued. Actually, I thought she was going to talk to me in Japanese, but she took my temperature, 37.1 degrees, and went away. Over here, they are really conscious about their body temperature and usually know it down to the decimal point. In England, we don't really give a crap about it, I think. Sometimes we're hot, sometimes cold. I think that's not entirely true. I think in the UK, we probably still do pay attention to our temperature and take our temperature, especially doctors and nurses. But still, I think that maybe in Japan they're a bit more focused on specific body temperatures. Anyway, I think I should chill out and play the ABC game again. This time, different smells. Z, zoo, smell. Okay, I played the ABC game. I may have to think of something else. I've just about pushed that one to its limit, I reckon. I just met a funny nurse who asked me what I want to eat next week. She gave me options like chicken or fish, etc. I know I'll be eating a lot of chicken and fish, and on one day some pork, and one day tempura and udon. Actually, looking back on it now, it's pretty good. I got to eat all this pretty nice Japanese food. I mean, hospital food we know is not the best food ever, is it? But this food that I got in this hospital was not too bad, and it was all classic Japanese dishes. The guy opposite me is still watching baseball. What a boring game. Just an excuse for waving your arse in the air and looking serious. I feel restless and like my heart is nervous. I'm bored mainly. I don't need stimulation. I need release or something. Best to just slow it all down and just chill out right here in the moment. Day 2. Okay, it's about 2 p.m. I slept really well last night, but my mouth was so dry whenever I woke up and my lips are all cracked. I've got the air conditioner next to me in my bed. I've got the air conditioner next to my bed, and I think it may be drying me out a bit when I close the curtain at night. Still, I like this spot. I'm in the corner, out of the way. I'm not too close to anyone else. I've got the window with a good view. No worries. From the window, I can see a view of the valley stretching away from me with some round hills at the sides. In the valley are random buildings, typically Japanese. I can also see black kites gliding around. So this hospital was in a place called Yokosuka, which is like just down the coast from Tokyo and Yokohama. And it's quite a nice part of the world, part of Japan really, not far from the seaside. And you've got these hills that sort of go down towards the coast. And I said, I can see black kites gliding around. Black kites are these birds of prey, kind of like hawks that would glide around looking for things to eat. I spent most of the day lying around listening to The Orb and the Beatles. The Orb, so this is the album by the group called The Orb, the sort of ambient techno group called The Orb. The album was Adventures Beyond the Ultra World. This is their best album, but UF Orb is pretty good because of the tunes Blue Room and Towers of Dub. I think Sgt. Pepper is my favourite Beatles album. It seems to be somehow warm and snug and a bit removed from their other stuff. I had a bit of excitement with my drip today. So remember, I was still getting this intravenous drip going into a vein in my hand, connected to these bags of mysterious fluid hanging from a metal sort of frame that was next to my bed. So I had a bit of excitement with the drip. The drip was nearly finished and I really needed the toilet. And then my lunch came. I decided to try and walk with the drip to the toilet because obviously I wanted to be able to eat my lunch without feeling like I really needed the toilet. So I decided, right, I'll go to the toilet now, even though the drip isn't finished. I'll go and I'll take the drip with me on its metal frame. So I decided to try and walk with the drip to the toilet. It's on wheels, so I thought it would be okay. I got to the toilet and noticed the tube, so the tube coming out of my hand, going into the bag, I noticed the tube up to the drip was all red and filled with my blood. So for some reason it had started going the other way. My blood had started going out into the tube and was heading to the bag. So I was losing blood into the drip. So I slowly went back to the bed and had to lie down again. The drip started dripping again and the blood went back into my arm. I just had to wait about 15 minutes before the drip finished and the nurse came to remove it. Then I went to the toilet, relieved myself, washed my hands, and came back to eat my lunch. Delicious pork with rice balls and some eggplant. Not bad. How exciting. So that was like one of the most exciting moments of that particular day. All day, the guy opposite me has been watching Go on TV. I can't understand that game. So Go is like this old board game. It's like where you have all these pieces on a board. It's a bit like, kind of like drafts or something. I could not understand it, and the guy just watched Go, this game, on TV all day long. So later, about 8 p.m, I had a few visitors today. My girlfriend's mum and dad, they brought me some flowers. From my girlfriend. Really sweet. Her parents were really kind and said I looked better. I can't believe it. They've been so helpful and caring. My girlfriend is coming tomorrow, and she's going to bring The Two Towers by Tolkien, the Lord of the Rings, because I've just about finished Fellowship of the Ring. So Lord of the Rings is in 3 volumes. So I was actually reading the Fellowship of the Ring and had just about finished it. And luckily my girlfriend decided that she'd bring the next book as well, so I could read that. Then my Nova student doctor visited me with his son. I was very surprised at that. He was the doctor who arranged for me to come here. Very thoughtful of him to check up on me. This evening, a couple of my colleagues visited, which was a big surprise. They also brought me some flowers, so I'm Mr. Popular. They stayed for a while and we chatted. They seemed genuinely concerned and everything. How nice. Now it's 8:15 p.m. and I'm just about to finish Fellowship of the Ring and then probably listen to some tunes and go to sleep. Very pleasant. How nice. Also, I learned from one of my colleagues that it's possible to get glandular fever from a mosquito. It all clicks into place. I've been feeling terrible since a mosquito bit me more than 15 times in one night. It's all gone downhill from there. That was nearly a week before my girlfriend went away and I got sick. That damn mosquito. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and scratching my arm. I looked and there was a smear of blood where I'd killed the mosquito instinctively as I woke up. Then I noticed all the bites. 3 days later, I was being driven insane by all the bites. I felt really bad ever since. It looks like I'll need a couple of weeks off after I get out of hospital. I might not even go to work until after my parents come on holiday. My parents were due to come like the next month for a couple of weeks to have a holiday in Japan and see me. So yeah, the mosquito thing, I don't know if it's possible to get glandular fever or mononucleosis from a mosquito. I've Googled it since and have sort of seen some things that suggest it might be possible, but I think it's rare. But anyway, like a week before I got really sick, there was one particular night where in my room in my apartment, so I had like this sliding glass door that led out onto the balcony, and I would always make sure the door was closed because mosquitoes would come in, and they were like tiger mosquitoes as well, like really aggressive ones. The door had an insect screen as well, like one of those kind of mesh screens that allows the air to come in, but not insects. And just this one particular night, I opened the mesh screen to go out and hang something on my balcony. Just for a moment, opened the mesh screen and closed it again. And in that moment, a mosquito must have come in because I instantly then went to sleep. And I was lying down mostly naked without a lot of covers on me because it was so boiling hot. And that mosquito that night, I think, just bit me about 15 times all over my body. And as I said, I woke up instinctively scratching my arm and I actually killed the mosquito in my sleep. So I woke up looking at this blood on my arm, thinking what's going on, and then realised I'd been bitten all over my body by this bloody mosquito, and it was so annoying. Like the bites were so itchy and even prevented me from being able to sleep very well. And I wonder if that mosquito might have caused this infection, but it, as I said, it all went downhill from there. So who knows? It might have been that. I mean, they call glandular fever the kissing fever, kissing disease or something. And it's typical that it gets shared between people when they kiss. But, I hadn't been going around kissing lots of people. I mean, I had my girlfriend. I wouldn't like to suggest that she gave it to me. Who knows? Who knows? Oops. But anyway, it was interesting. So one of my colleagues had told me that you can get glandular fever from a mosquito, but it's certainly pretty mysterious. But I do remember definitely feeling really bad, like after that mosquito incident. But maybe it's just a coincidence. Day 3, it's about 3:10 in the afternoon, and I'm getting a bit bored now. I spent the day finishing Fellowship of the Ring, getting a really long drip, dozing and listening to my favourites mini discs. So I had these mini discs and a mini disc player. The mini discs had like compilations of some of my favourite music on them. Not very exciting. I had a shower and a shave today. That's quite exciting. Also, I spoke to the bloke opposite briefly. So the man opposite. He asked me, "Yokosuka?" And I answered with "Zushi." Eigo no kyoshi desu, which I thought meant I'm an English teacher. Zushi no nova desu, which meant, the Zushi Nova, the Nova in Zushi, the Zushi of Nova. He was like, soka. And that was about it. So that was the depth of the conversation I had with the guy opposite me. He was like, "Yokosuka?" I said, "Zushi." English teacher. Nova in Zushi. That was it. So exciting. I'm feeling better, although I can still feel all my glands are swollen and my back aches. That may be my kidneys or something. The tonsil infection seems to have gone, but they're still swollen. I slept well last night. Another 9 hours. Wow. Mum and Dad are going to call me again at 3:45, although they don't need to. I should phone Azusa just to check that she got my mail. I also might email and phone Matt and Moto. We're going to see Oasis on Sunday the 29th. So I should just let them know where I am and what's happening. So actually I had I had tickets to see Oasis in Japan, and I was going to go with a couple of friends. Also, my girlfriend's going to come and visit me today. I don't know when though. That should be pretty nice. I'll have to thank her for the flowers. Anyway, I'll go downstairs in about 10 minutes to receive that phone call. My girlfriend's bringing The Two Towers, that's the next Lord of the Rings book, with her, so I can get stuck into that later. I bet I go stir crazy later this week. If you go stir crazy, it means you sort of go a bit mad, normally because you're stuck in one particular situation. A bit like when you're in prison. If you just go mad because you're stuck in one room, you go stir crazy. It'll probably go much faster than I expect. More later. So day 3, day 4 or day 3, I lost track. It's 6:55 a.m. first thing in the morning. I was just woken up by a nurse who is really genki. That means sort of energetic. And she said, "Ohayo gozaimasu," and "wake up." And she gave me a hot towel and put it in my face. She just put this hot towel in my face. I'm half asleep. I had a strange dream last night. I worked in some big company, but I'd been away sick, so I'd lost touch with my job, and I was doing really badly. I didn't know what was going on. My widowed mother, that's my mum who's lost her husband, so my widowed mother, so my dad apparently in this dream had died. My widowed mother was getting married to Fred Ward. Fred Ward is a Hollywood actor. So my widowed mother was getting married to Fred Ward, who was an utter bastard, and we hated each other. I remember holding a little plant pot with a little green plant and pleading with him to treat my mother well. So I was standing there with this little plant pot with a little green plant in it. Maybe something like this, standing there with this little plant pot and saying to him, "Please treat my mother well." I said, "Please, we both want the same thing." This is in my weird dream. my nightmare. But he just slapped the plant pot out of my hands. Then we went into the house and discovered that an upstairs bedroom was haunted by a ghost. It had happened before, but we were all really scared, and we stayed in a downstairs room while I began to phone the police or someone. We could hear noises of the poltergeist, this ghost, upstairs. Then a lamp floated down the stairs and threw itself at me. This is all in my dream, right? I knocked it away with my hand, and I shouted, "It threw that at me!" But my mum, who I think was played by Holly Hunter, another Hollywood actor, which is strange, said to me, "But it didn't hit you, did it?" And I said, "Only because I defended myself." Then a glass of brandy floated into the room, and that came towards me, and I knocked it away. But then I realised that the ghost was offering it to me in order to say sorry. Very strange. Dreams are weird, aren't they? What do they mean? So, more stuff to write today. Yesterday, my girlfriend came to visit, which was nice, although we were interrupted twice and didn't really say goodbye to each other properly. Anyway, she brought me The Two Towers, and I paid her back, and she also brought Return of the King, which is the third book, because her mum had bought it for me as a gift. I was surprised. I didn't expect her to buy me another present. I think she's enjoying taking care of me, to be honest. My girlfriend also brought me some water and tangerines. Moto also visited me, which was a real surprise. Shout out to my friend Moto. I'd only left a message on his phone about 2 hours before, so I was really surprised when he turned up. It turned out that James, my brother, had told him I was ill and had given him the address of the hospital. He brought me some kettle chips, that's like crisps, and shortbread, as well as an Antonio Carlos Jobim CD. It's like a Brazilian bossa nova artist. Well chosen. I was really glad to see him, and he spoke to my girlfriend for a while before he left. Then Nadia, this is another one of my colleagues. Nadia was a sort of amazing person, really, very eccentric and energetic, and the sort of person who did lots of things, organised things, and everyone else got involved in her energetic plans. I say Nadia was because, unfortunately, she's no longer with us. I learned, when was it, 10, 15 years ago, that Nadia had died, which is kind of sad. But anyway, Nadia visited me and brought some kind of jelly snacks and a couple of copies of Viz. Viz is a kind of funny magazine. She brought me a couple of copies of Viz, bless her. I introduced her to my girlfriend, but they didn't talk a lot. Nadia was quite direct, as she is, and maybe she scared my girlfriend away or something. Anyway, I chatted to Nadia for a while, which was funny because she's pretty eccentric and a good laugh. Now it's nearly 1 p.m. and I've just finished lunch and taken my drugs. There are 2 new patients in the room, 2 old guys. I've no idea what's wrong with them. They arrived earlier with their shirts and trousers and ties. On, and they're now lying in their respective beds wearing their pyjamas. I got clean ones too. The pyjamas are a bit like jinbei, so they're kind of like looked a little bit like traditional Japanese clothing where you fold them over and tie them on the side. I'm getting quite attached to mine. Anyway, these guys are pretty quiet, but one of them is in the bed right next to me. He's just right there on the other side of the curtain. I think he smells a bit. He smells a bit of those bags in the toilet, but maybe I'm just overreacting. Sometimes he mutters in Japanese, sort of like... He seems to sort of like be talking to himself. And I listen when he talks to the nurses. On the other side of my bed, I'm lucky because I have the big window and I get tons of natural light. On the whole, it's a very pleasant place to be. In the morning I get sunlight on my feet, and in the afternoon I get to watch the view lit by sun from behind. Today it's a really clear day, so the sky is blue and it's really nice and cool outside, my kind of weather. The natural light seems very clean and blue, it's very nice. I think I'll listen to a bit of the orb. I can't believe it, this is really pleasant, but I suppose that's the idea. The doctor is going to analyse my blood tomorrow, then I'll see how I'm doing. Actually, that guy next door does smell of those bags in the toilet. Nasty. Maybe I should stop taking my decongestants so I can't smell anything. So decongestants are, it's a kind of medicine that you take to clear up congestion in your nose. It clears the snot out of your nose. So I said maybe I should stop taking them so that my nose gets blocked again so I can't smell anything. Actually, that guy next door does smell of those bags. I've just read that. It's about 7:30 p.m. now. I'm still not completely sure when I'll be getting here. Sorry, I'm not completely sure when I'll be getting out of here. I expect it'll be at around. I expect it will be around Saturday, but even then I'm not sure I'll be able to go back to work, depending on my health. I may have to stay away from work until after my holiday with the family. That will mean that I'll miss about 1 month of pay. Also, the expenses from this time are going to cost about 200,000 yen. I'll have to pay that when I leave and then claim it back from the health insurance company. I'll be buggered for cash though, meaning I won't have any cash. For the next 2 paydays, that's like 2 more months. So basically, it was going to be a very expensive time. I wouldn't have any money. So there go my savings each month. I can't save anything until at least December. Bollocks. I'm still about £900 overdrawn. That's basically in debt. Japan is such an expensive place. 8:42 p.m. I haven't written about this yet, but there's a guy who works in the hospital who speaks English. I was introduced to him when I first got here, and he has helped me out a few times since then. He's actually from Indonesia, where they learn English properly in school and are more skillful in picking up foreign languages, I expect. Not sure that's true, but they certainly, I think, learn English in a different way to the Japanese and learn it earlier. Any Indonesians I've met spoke good English. His name is Chandra-san, although I thought it was Sandra at first. So I thought his name was Sandra, which is a girl's name, but it turns out his name was Chandra. Chandra-san. Anyway, he's a nice guy and has been really helpful, especially when seeing the doctor and when explaining my medicine to me. Although he's Indonesian, he seems very comfortable in Japan and also seems quite Japanese in character, polite, a bit nervous or uncomfortable or awkward, but he's quite chatty and has a laugh. Today he was helping me choose food from the menu. I had to choose all of next week's food, although I hope I won't be here next week. Sandra-san had to explain all the food, and there were some really funny moments where he was in stitches, meaning laughing a lot, trying to explain all the typical Japanese foods on the menu. Sometimes he was laughing uncontrollably. I think the Japanese and their eating habits are very funny, particularly when it comes to eating things like natto. Natto is a kind of infamous Japanese food. It's basically soybeans which are starting to fermented or decomposing soybeans, and they go all sticky and they got this very pungent smell, and it's kind of like Marmite in the UK. Either you love it or you absolutely hate it. So natto is a very sort of characteristic Japanese food. I think the Japanese are very they're funny with their eating habits, especially when it comes to eating things like natto. The culture obviously suits Chandra well, and I think he's quite tickled by its nuances and ins and outs. Tickled meaning sort of amused. That's one of the charms of Japan. Their whole attitude towards their culture is so charming. Just the little details, and how it's quite clear that they get a lot of pleasure from little customs like eating and preparing certain types of food. Observing and commenting on Japanese everyday customs is always a great source of amusement. Well, the guy next to me is sound asleep, like fast asleep, completely asleep. I think he still smells a bit, But I can't complain. This is a hospital after all. He keeps muttering in Japanese though, and does cliched yawns, with his mouth open, making a sound. I remember that. He used to... The guy, I just hear him going... like a cartoon sound effect of someone yawning. But I'd noticed that a lot of Japanese men would do those really, really sort of like cartoon sound effect, stock sound effect yawning sounds. Like that. And also sneezes. Actually, Japanese guys also have mega cliched sneezes too. Achoo! They don't hold it back either. They just let the sneeze take hold and do its business. And they let the vocal cords relax while it happens. Often I hear really loud and expressive sneezes. Acha! Very funny. Like you'd hear that at the station in the morning, come down onto the station platform. And you'd often hear like businessmen just going, Achoo! Hacha! Cha! Day 4, 7:40 a.m. The guy in the bed next to me was really noisy last night. He spent a lot of time talking in his sleep and appeared to wake with a start a few times. As if you wake with a start, you kind of wake up like that suddenly. Lots and lots of sleep talking and him going, Today I woke with a kind of ulcer on my tongue. An ulcer is like a little painful little spot. A painful little spot on your tongue. I get ulcers in my mouth a lot actually, and on my tongue. And I got them a lot during this period. After having glandular fever, I remember I used to get a lot of ulcers, and I tend to get them when I'm very tired. So when I get into that kind of glandular fever feeling, and I still get it to this day, I get like a migraine headache that won't go away, feel very tired, and then ulcers appear in my mouth. So today I woke with a kind of ulcer on my tongue, although it doesn't hurt too much. My left tonsil is giving me some grief, meaning it's painful, and hurts a bit when I swallow, so... Ow! Ah! First thing this morning, the nurse took a sample of my blood. They're going to test it, and then later I'll go to see the doctor with Chandra-san, and she'll tell me how I'm doing. I have no idea what the results of the blood test will be, but I have a feeling that it'll show I still have a high white blood cell count, and that the glandular fever is still with me. Now I'm looking forward to breakfast, and I'm a bit pissed off about my tonsil hurting. I'm flying through The Two Towers, that book, and I'm more than halfway through already. I'm glad my girlfriend's mum bought The Return of the King for me. It's nearly 2 p.m. now. I've just got to write some notes now so I can clear up what's going on. So this is like stuff I wrote down after having seen the doctor. Doc says I can leave tomorrow. So phone Mr. Tatehana at Nova to talk to him about payment. Hopefully he'll pay the hospital and send the relevant forms for the hospital to complete. Then the hospital sends a Ryoshusho and medical certificate to JMA, that's the insurance company, and they refund Mr. Tatehana, no worries. So these notes were all for my own benefit, so I remembered what was going on. So phone Mr. Tatehana, phone Nova, phone the insurance company, speak to mum and dad, phone my girlfriend's mum and tell her when I'll be leaving. Apart from that, I'll need a Ryoshusho, which is some sort of like document, and a medical certificate myself for my own reference. Questions for the doctor. What should I do after I leave? When can I work? Will I need medicine? Will I have to report back to the hospital at all? Can I drink alcohol? Or should I avoid it? How much rest time will I need? Can I take regular showers? Because they were telling me that I shouldn't take showers because my temperature was too high. Can I do any kind of exercise? And then when I get out, I need to sort out the next 2 weeks with Nova. Lots of other things. 8:50 that evening. Looks like I'll be leaving tomorrow. I've got quite a few questions for the doctor, and Chandra-san is going to help me. He's been really helpful and also really seems to have enjoyed helping me out. I expect translating for me and being a kind of counsellor for me, has been much more exciting than his usual job, maintenance of things like beds, tables, etc. So Chandra-san was actually he was kind of like a caretaker. He would repair tables and chairs, do repairs on things in the hospital. He normally wasn't a translator, but he was the only one who spoke any English in the hospital, really. Some of the high-level doctors spoke some English, but none of the nurses really did. So Chandra-san would be asked to come and help me out. So normally he'd be downstairs fixing tables, and then he'd come up and have to talk to me. I wonder how often he gets to have personal contact with the patients. Anyway, tomorrow will probably be quite busy, and I must make sure I have everything sorted out in my mind before I leave. I've got to deal with the issues of my condition and how much rest I need after leaving, etc. So I thought I'd be leaving the next day, but I didn't. In fact, I spent another week in the hospital. The payment issues and stuff. Tomorrow I'll phone Nova to tell them when I can realistically return to work. I'd like to put that off until after my parents' holiday. I actually had a holiday booked in my schedule in October, but that was a few weeks away. The idea of going back to work and going back into that working routine and teaching those kids classes, the idea of it was just horrible, I have to say. So I was really hoping I would be able to find a way to avoid that and go back to work at the end of October. As for now, I've just got one more night in my bed, surrounded by my curtain. The guy next door continues to make his grunting, sucking and yawning noises, as well as bits of sleep talking and even laughter. The room is quite full now. 7 people, I think, and I'm glad to have had this spot by the window. I'll be saying goodbye to it all tomorrow. The nurses, who I've managed to communicate with, and I've got to know their faces. The view from my window, the bloke opposite, and his chattering, muttering conversation with his family every afternoon. The toilet with its sliding door and disgusting smelling bags of urine on one wall with their steel lids, urine stained and corroded. The angelic choral music played throughout the ward before lights out at 9 p.m. every night. The regular cups of Japanese tea poured from big steel teapots. The meals brought on trays with onigiri, fried fish, salad and various Japanese oddities, all edible enough. My medicine, a little bottle with white liquid and my various pills. Having the drip twice a day, 1 large bottle of pink liquid and 1 small bottle of clear antibiotics. Strangely, it became a bit pleasant having the liquid dripping directly into my body, although I couldn't feel it except for the taste in my mouth and the build-up of snot in my nose. The plastic attachment that sticks into my left forearm, so it was my arm actually, and is stuck down with white bandage tape. It doesn't hurt at all. My cool Japanese pyjamas, very comfortable. The other patients who weren't overly accommodating, but neither was I to them. But I expect they all had their own problems to deal with. Everyone minded their own business mostly. My Lord of the Rings trilogy, which has taken up most of my time here. Regular visits to the outpatients area every morning. Examinations by the doctor, Yamamoto, or the woman with short hair who spoke some English. Always I'd spend 5 minutes at the nebulizer, which has tubes that go either into the nose or the mouth and supply antibiotics, I think, as a kind of mist to be inhaled. So I'd have to sit in front of this machine, this big machine, and sit down and breathe into this sort of mask. And apparently it would supply this kind of antibiotic mist into my system. I'm leaving tomorrow, but I don't think this will be over for a while. It takes a few weeks to get over glandular fever, so I expect I'll spend some time at home now, getting bored and having to look after myself and having to put up with my flatmate. I had 2 flatmates. The first flatmate I didn't really get on with him very well and found him a bit annoying. I mean, looking back on it now, he wasn't that bad. I've quite enjoyed the sanctuary of this hospital and the convenience, having other people look after my health while I lie around all day, reading, daydreaming and listening to music. I'll have to continue this spirit when I get home and try to take care of myself. I hope the doctor gives me more antibiotics and some instructions on what I should and shouldn't do. A lot of rest is probably a good idea. I expect I'll be over this eventually. I can still feel the glands, like a numb, stiff or tight feeling around my neck and head. I had that for weeks afterwards. Also, there's a bit of pain on my left tonsil, a kind of dry pain, just hanging on at the end. I've also picked up a couple of mouth ulcers on the roof of my mouth, for heaven's sake, and on my tongue. I hope they don't flare up, and I hope they don't spark any more infection in the tonsils. Anyway, I fancy getting some sleep tonight. So good night. Day 5. Well, I'm still here. I'm not leaving today, but I'm staying for a few more days until my condition improves. My tonsillitis has returned a bit and is quite painful, although I'm really tired. I'm really tired, even though I spend most of my time lying down. So I'm here because I need rest and care. I wonder how long I'll stay, and I wonder how long I can stay before the insurance companies say they won't pay. Anyway, best not to worry about things. Things with the insurance company and Nova are sorted out for the time being, and I'm a bit downhearted because my throat is painful again and I have ulcers on my tongue and on the roof of my mouth. It's very uncomfortable. The guy opposite me has left. Good for him. I always thought he seemed pretty healthy. He's been replaced by the guy who was in the bed next to me. He quickly claimed the only other window place in the room. Clever chap. He's still yawning loudly and muttering in his sleep. The room is quite full. There are 7 of us now, so most people have their curtains drawn to protect their personal space. A few of them have those urine bags, but they're not too smelly. Must be nasty having to carry one of them around, though. I don't really understand why that. Maybe they had maybe they had urine issues or kidney issues, I'm not sure. One guy seems to have lots of phlegm. That's like stuff that you have to stuff that makes you cough. And he gurgles and coughs and spits into a little bowl. Lovely. Being sarcastic. I remember he sounded like Daffy Duck. So he made these weird, slightly scary noises when he was coughing, and it made me feel like, oh my God, he seems so unwell. He'd make these kind of noises. So he'd be over there going and then spitting into this bowl. It was really horrible. I got a great package from home today with good letters, a card from James, some photos of home which made me feel homesick, information about glandular fever. Now I know a lot, and it seems to make sense. Rest is most important, and my tonsils are sensitive because of the virus. Newspaper cuttings, an Edge magazine, that's a magazine about computer games. Although I've got a bit cut off from the world of video games, it's still interesting to read people's intelligent comments about it. So I used to be like really into video games for a while. The end of the 90s and the beginning of the noughties, I was like quite interested in the industry and stuff. Maybe I could have worked in the video games industry if I'd stayed in Liverpool after university and got maybe a job at Psygnosis, which was a video games company that was based in Liverpool. Could have had a totally different career, but I didn't. Anyway, my girlfriend said she'd visit me today, and I'll speak to Mum and Dad on the phone later. Not much more to tell you. Chandra-san has proved to be a very important person. I bought another notebook where this will continue. I also need Thursday. I'm staying until the doctors think I can go. For the insurance, the doctor will complete the doctor's note when I leave, and they'll give it to me to fax. Blah, 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 blah. So then I moved on to the other notepad. What did I do with it? There it is. Okay, I hope you're finding this interesting. Like I said, I'm not sure, but I'm just doing this anyway because kind of like I felt like I wrote these diaries, right? And when you write a diary, you just kind of think, what's the point? Is anyone ever going to read this? So I didn't want this all to be a complete waste of time writing all this stuff and just no one ever reading it. I don't know. I just feel like at the time I was writing it, I sort of hoped that someone might read it, that someone might find it interesting. And so that's why I guess that's why I'm reading it out, because I wanted some of this to be heard by someone. Otherwise, what's going to happen to these diaries when I die eventually? My wife or my kids or whoever's left are going to have to go through my possessions. They'll find this bag that I've got here in the office with all these diaries in it. Are they really going to read that stuff? What's that? I don't know. I mean, in any case, maybe they'll just throw those things away. They might not have time to read them. Maybe they'll read them and find them fascinating. Maybe they'll read them and find them shocking because they will learn things about me that they didn't know before, stuff that I'm not sharing in this episode. In any case, I felt like I wanted this stuff to be heard, so let me continue. There's not that much more, right? So there's really just a few more pages in this one. So day 6, 5:30 p.m. One of my colleagues just visited me. She gave me a really cool Star Wars Lego pen with interchangeable parts and a Lego man Darth Vader with a little cape and a scarred face under his helmet and everything. It's the sort of thing, even when I was 25 years old, that's the sort of thing that appealed to me. My colleague Diane is being really great and trying to sort things out for me with Nova. She was like my sort of line manager, senior teacher at the school where I worked. And she was being very helpful. Thanks to Diane for helping out a lot. It looks like foreign personnel have mucked a few things up and haven't told the sushi school that I can't work over the next few days. It's making life difficult for the staff and teachers. Diane is speaking to Nova now, and I reckon it's going to get me she's going to get me some emergency leave. So Diane was really helpful in helping me get some time off. Diane also brought me some flowers from the Japanese staff and from my new area manager. Very nice. It also looks like I won't be able to see Oasis on Sunday. I never ever got to see them. I've never seen Oasis live, and I'm not sure I ever will. Depends. If they stay together, because they've reformed recently to do a few gigs. If they stay together and do more shows, maybe I'll go and see them, but depends how much those tickets are. Anyway, I won't be able to see Oasis on Sunday. I might not even be able to be out of the hospital by then, considering I need so much rest. Also, going to the gig wouldn't be a good idea. I'm gutted. I was looking forward to seeing the Gallaghers and perhaps shouting some abuse at them or something. I've got to arrange with Matt how he can get the tickets from my apartment. I'll probably have to speak to my flatmate and arrange for them to meet on Sunday at the apartment. I hope he's there. If not, Matt will have to come and visit me here to get the key. This is before the days when all the tickets were online. You could just share them so easily. There's a guy in the room now. He arrived yesterday or a couple of days ago. He must have some throat problem because he keeps coughing up phlegm and spitting it into a plastic bag or a bowl or something. All the curtains are drawn around his bed. It's grim because of the noise. It sounds like an angry, sick Daffy Duck. And is really nasty. Poor bloke. Sometimes it sounds like he's puking and clearing his throat. It's a bit nasty, but it's not as bad for me to hear as it is for him to suffer. I've nearly finished The Return of the King. The whole Lord of the Rings story is an absolute work of genius, amazing storytelling, and at times really beautiful. The nurse opposite seems to be draining a guy's urine bag into a bucket. The throat guy is calling for attention or something. It's all comfortable here except for other people's suffering. A few more days of rest here and I should go home. I won't be able to rest as well there, but I feel like I'm not quite as sick as the other guys around me. Still, rest is most important for me now, and this is the best place for that. Tonsils and ulcers are still giving me jip, meaning giving me pain, giving me trouble, and I'm tired. The doctor says I should just sleep. I'll lie back and listen to the orb and vibe out and maybe drift off into sleep or something. Day 8. I woke up yesterday with a red rash all over my face and neck. That means red spots all over my whole body, in fact. So I woke up on day 8, suddenly, big red rash all over me. Today it's much worse. My face is all red and blotchy, and there are tons of red spots all over my neck, body, arms, hands, etc. It's a side effect from the antibiotics, but it looks really ugly and it's quite hot and itchy. So it turns out that I'm allergic to penicillin, which is a problem when they were pumping bags of it into me every day. It's making me feel a bit depressed, mainly because I just look so bad. Still, it could be worse. I'm not feeling all that bad. My tonsils have cleared up a bit since a few days ago, and my ulcers have calmed down. The rash is a bit itchy though. I'm a bit paranoid about people visiting me now. I feel okay about it, but I wonder how other people would react. I don't know what my girlfriend would think. I suppose it would be interesting to see her reaction. I've got a feeling it would be surprise and amazement rather than sympathy. But I don't know. I think she doesn't know how to react to me sometimes because she doesn't know how I'll react or how I'll feel. I think she doesn't say things that are on her mind because she thinks it'll piss me off. She doesn't realise that I like it when people speak their minds and ask me personal questions. Anyway, I want to see her, so I hope she visits me today. It looks like I'll be here for another 4 or more days now that this rash has appeared. They're taking another blood test tomorrow. Then I'm seeing the dermatologist on Wednesday. Today is Sunday. I remember seeing that dermatologist. So that's someone who specialises in skin conditions. And he had when he was younger, he must have had a really bad skin disease because his skin was all red with like holes in it. He had a really terrible, his skin was all scarred on his face. That was interesting, meeting him, thinking, wow, this guy must have survived some horrible skin condition, and that maybe this is why he became a dermatologist himself. He was a really nice guy, I remember that. I don't mind staying in the hospital, but I'm starting to get really bored now. I'm running out of music and I've finished Lord of the Rings. I might have to get someone to run an errand to my apartment and pick up some more music, some underpants and another book for me. I'll be seeing the doctor in a while. Might be a bit embarrassing. And Chandra-san isn't here today, so I'll have to struggle without him. The doctor is really cool, actually. He's quite young and friendly and has a sense of humour. The nurses in this surgery really annoy me, though. They stand around while the doctor is talking to me and stare at me with the most amazing self-important and knowing expressions on their faces, which I'm sure are not right. They just like to look like they're really important and they really understand and agree with what the doctor says and does. Also, they nod knowingly when I'm explaining something to Chandra in English, when I know for sure that they can't understand what I'm saying. It just proves that their whole demeanour is just for show and isn't backed up by any real understanding. It was a bit harsh of me, wasn't it, to write that? The nurses were all so helpful, but I was getting irritated at this point, and for some reason the nurses' behaviour was starting to annoy me. Day 9. The guy opposite has a visitor, and I've seen him before. He wears tracksuit trousers and football boots with moulded studs. So the guy opposite would have these visitors, and one guy would come and he'd be wearing football boots, right? Now they weren't football boots with studs. You know the studs on the bottom of football boots? He would walk into the hospital ward, into the hospital room with these football boots on. He walks into the room and makes the noise with his studs on the ground. Why the hell is he wearing football boots? They're not muddy or anything either. So this really bothered me. I just couldn't understand why this guy was wearing football boots. I mean, fair enough, maybe he'd been playing football and then went to visit his uncle or something in the hospital, but you'd imagine that he would take the football boots off, right? Especially when walking with studs. You know, the sound of studs walking on a flat, hard floor. You just think, it's not the sound that would bother me, it's just the fact that why did he keep the football boots on? I just could never understand that. And I wrote here, it's a typical Japanese misunderstanding. Maybe he thinks they're just trainers. Unlikely. Why would I assume that he didn't understand? But I just couldn't get my head around why this guy walked in with his football boots on. But there would often be those sort of moments in Japan, like things that I'd just see things and I'd just be thinking, what is going on? I just can't understand that at all. And then I wrote, maybe he's just come from a football game, but you'd expect him to take off his boots before visiting his friend or dad or uncle in hospital. Very strange. My rash is worse and is now all over my body. My face looks ugly and blotchy, and I've got spots all over my hands and arms and legs and chest and back. Everywhere. It's pretty fucked up, and it just seems to be one thing after another. So after going through all the rest of it, then I got this rash, and the rash got pretty bad in some areas, and I've still got some little scars actually on some like parts of my elbows. There's still scars where the rash got quite bad. I didn't take my painkiller after lunch because I thought I didn't need it, but now my tonsils are hurting a lot. Clearly I need the painkiller. The doctor and nurses have stopped giving me antibiotics now, so the rash should go away in a few days. I'm getting so bored now. I've listened to most of my mini discs and have finished Lord of the Rings. I've got some other books and magazines, so I'll just get into them and write a couple of letters. Can't do much now when I've got my drip on, though. My girlfriend might visit tonight. I hope she doesn't mind this rash. I've just realised that I've lost track of all the days in this diary. I'll have to write the dates each time now. It's nearly 10 p.m. and the guy opposite is making all kinds of over-the-top snoring noises, so like that. Sucking and snorting, etc. He also moans and laughs and stuff in his sleep. Monday the 30th of September. This is frustrating. It's about 10:15 p.m, by which time I'm usually asleep here, but instead I'm twisting and turning in my bed and going over all my failed opportunities with women in the past and getting more and more frustrated as I go along. I can't believe it. I'm in a hospital in Japan with glandular fever and covered in a red rash, and all I can think about are all the embarrassing moments and failed opportunities I've had with women in my life. This is just ridiculous, and I can't believe it. Adding to the stupidity is the pen I'm using. One of the students gave it to me via Jodie, one of my colleagues, who visited me today. It's pink with a plastic merlion on the top from Singapore. When you press down on the nib of the pen, the merlion lights up with a pink light. It's crazy. So I was just writing with this kind of silly pen and writing this quite serious feeling stuff. I'm just missing my girlfriend, blah, 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 blah. Da, 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 da. I'm just going to skip past some of that stuff. I'm just frustrated, stuck in this hospital bed with a painful throat and itchy skin. Tuesday, the 1st of October. It's about 7:30 p.m. There's a massive typhoon right overhead now, like a big storm. Big weather system. Strong wind. Lots of rain, very strong wind. There's a massive typhoon right overhead now. It came in off the Pacific Ocean today, and its path is directly over this area. It's blasting the windows, making them shake and whistle and threaten to break. The whole hospital is shaking because of the wind. It's quite mad, really. The doctor told me again that I can probably go home today. She, and there are two doctors who I see, one man and one woman, has to consult the dermatologist who's going to have another look at me tomorrow. As long as this rash isn't too serious, it seems to have calmed down today, I should be allowed to go. About the rash and the nurses, I remember that after I've been in the hospital for a while, and I was the only, let's say, Westerner in the hospital, it seemed that word travelled around the hospital and some of the nurses decided that they wanted to come and see me. Because I don't know what it's like these days in Japan, but at that time it was still a little bit rare for Japanese people to have much contact with, let's say, non-Japanese people, or at least people from Europe or from Britain or something, Westerners. It was still a little bit rare, and it's still a little bit of a novelty for them. So I actually used to get visits from nurses that I think weren't even working in my ward. And they would come just to kind of like have a look at me, you know. Like sometimes they'd be like 2 or 3 of them would come at a time, and they'd come and sort of talk to me in Japanese. I couldn't really answer. And they'd just come and stand there, or maybe have a look at me, maybe sort of take my temperature or something. And I got the distinct feeling they were there just because they wanted to come and see the English guy in the hospital. And I remember once this nurse I'd never met before came and told me she was going to rub cream into my body. And she took my t-shirt off. Sorry, not my t-shirt, my pyjama top. She took my pyjama top off and spent quite a long time massaging my back and rubbing this cream into me. That was interesting. So I was saying I should be allowed to go home tomorrow. I was really depressed and frustrated today. I'm not even looking forward to going home that much. Probably because I'm depressed, but it feels like I don't like it when my flatmate is around. And I just ignore the fact that a lot of what he does really annoys me. It just seems to be little petty things that he doesn't realise he's doing. And he'd probably think I was being a wanker for bringing them up. Like if I complained to him about them, he'd probably hate me for it. Still, I reckon I'm right to get pissed off. Examples: he doesn't clean or rinse the sink after a shave and leaves stubble and shaving foam all over the sink. So he'd shave and wash, he'd fill the sink with water, shave, right, and then wash his razor in the water and then just pull the plug out, and all the water would go down into the plug, but then all of the bits of stubble, bits of hair that he'd shaved off his face and shaving foam would be stuck to the side of the sink. He wouldn't clean up the sink afterwards, he'd just leave it. So I'd go in there to like wash my hands, brush my teeth and stuff to go to bed, and then I'd have to clean up his dirty sort of sink. And other things he would other petty little stuff. I said, it's not too bad, I suppose. Actually, I'm probably being too sensitive and I should just chill out. Anyway, I'm really ready to get out of here. The boredom is getting me down and I feel like it's making me tired and sick. This typhoon is making everything uncomfortable, along with my itchy rash. I just want to be whisked away. I'll try to go to sleep. Strange, I finished Lord of the Rings and I was so engrossed. Now it feels like there's an empty space in my life. Odd. 2nd of October, 6:40 a.m. The typhoon has gone and outside it's sunny with a perfectly blue sky and all is calm. 5 p.m. The doctor told me I can leave tomorrow. I kept constantly being told I could leave, but then told that I couldn't. The doctor told me I can leave tomorrow. Good, I've been getting super bored over the last couple of days and feeling pissed off. Now I've got to deal with Nova and apply for medical leave. I'm trying to decide how much leave I should apply for. The most healthy option would be all the way up to my holiday, which is about 2 weeks. That way my body would completely recover, my liver would repair itself fully, etc. Or I could apply for about 1 week and work for a few days before the holiday. One problem is that my holiday begins on the 18th, but my family arrive on the 15th. It would be easier if I could get leave, that means time off, right up to my holiday, so I could meet my family when they first get here. I'll go for that, I reckon. It will also give me a chance to get properly well. I'm screwed for money anyway. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do. The next 2 weeks are going to be very quiet and I'll have to try and save as much of the cash I have now as possible to last me for next month and for as long as possible. I remember that 2-week period. I spent a lot of time just really slowing myself down, just trying to live without any stress at all. And it was a very sort of serene and very peaceful period, actually. The weather had got better. It wasn't boiling hot and humid anymore. And it was a really important learning experience for me, learning how to de-stress and how to live slowly and how to live moment by moment in a day and how to start cooking proper food for myself and just how to slow down and live in a more mentally healthy kind of way. I just look back on that time in a really, really nice way, even though at the time it was like not great, but I kind of learned how to relax. I've still got this rash, although it's not as bad. It itches though, and the worst, most itchy part, well, I can't tell you what that was, but it was extremely inconvenient and annoying. 8 o'clock, more visitors. Matt and Moto visited me. That was cool. They brought me some food and magazines and stuff. Matt travelled a long way to see me. Now I'm alone again. This is probably my last night here. What a strange experience. I was just thinking this hospital feels like a little box, and I'm living inside, but outside there are just many more boxes, all connected. I suddenly felt very claustrophobic in this country, like there's no space or free air or room to breathe. Japan is great, but I think it's just too closed in for me. I feel claustrophobic here. I need more space. I did used to get the feeling that I was always knocking my head on things, or that rooms were always slightly too small for me. But also got the feeling that, so in the little room, outside of that room, was just everywhere where I lived, I felt like was very urban, like a very built up area, very compressed, with so many people all living in a small space, and so many buildings on top of each other, and then like high-rise buildings with many floors, and then under those buildings as well, whole underground systems with train lines and underground car parks and basements, and I just felt like I was in the middle of this incredibly compressed and crowded place. I feel like I need more silence and more personal space. At school, it's kind of a constant probing of my personal life, which I don't mind. This would be like the way the students would often be very curious about me, which I understand, because like I said before, they didn't meet many non-Japanese people that much, or at least people from the UK. And so in lessons, a lot of the time people were very curious about me and would often probe my personal life. Clearly, since then I've got used to that. And in fact, that's kind of a lot of what I do on my podcast to an extent, like this, reading this diary out. But at the time, I remember it felt a bit invasive sometimes, that students would often be very sort of curious about me all the time, which I didn't mind that much. Although I think being a Nova teacher really feeds people's fevered egos. This is also another feeling I would get, that some of the teachers at the school would let this curiosity from the Japanese and this sort of sense of interest that the Japanese had in us, that they would let that go to their head and it would make them arrogant. I said, it's a big ego thing because you feel like an important and special person, but it's also quite pathetic because it's just not real or something, or at least Japanese people act really impressed with you because they're being polite. Right? So maybe Japanese people are being polite when they seem so impressed and interested in you. And everything you say is like, oh, wow, that's fascinating. Maybe that's just politeness. But for some people, it would just go to their heads and make them big-headed and arrogant. I feel like there are a lot of people here that love Nova and get a lot out of it, and it feeds their egos, but at home they're just very ordinary and unspecial. That's the charisma man phenomenon. Ego workout or something. I want wide open spaces and no people from miles around. Thursday, the 3rd of October, I was discharged today, meaning allowed to leave the hospital, finally. I just wrote a big final hospital diary entry, but in the wrong diary. Now, I can't find the other diary where that was written. It wasn't in the first one I was reading from. There's some other diary I wrote this long entry, but I can't find it. Anyway, typical. Typical. I wanted the whole hospital escapade to be captured in this diary, but you'll just have to check the other one. Again, can't find it. Not that it really matters. I wonder what will happen to all these diaries. I suppose they just form a general collection of thoughts and comments. A lot of it probably sounds the same, but as I said in the other diary, I hope someone reads this, and not just nosy flatmates sneaking into my bedroom, but real people that I love. Maybe people I haven't met yet. Maybe people I have loved for a long time. So I was imagining the future when maybe someone would discover these diaries, and it could be like, now I'm married, I'm married and I've got 2 kids. Maybe those would be the people who would read this one day. But at the time I wrote this, I didn't have any significant others in my life, other than my parents and my brother, So I was imagining that maybe the people one day who read this will be people I love or people I've loved for a long time. Or maybe people I know and am yet to love. Whoever you are, I hope you have shared something with me after reading this, and I hope it wasn't just funny and embarrassing, but has at least shown you something about me or the world, or maybe even yourself. I think I was being a little bit over-ambitious with that one. I don't think it was quite as profound as I had thought, but the experience I had, I felt was a very profound and weird, different experience. Always very difficult to get those experiences and feelings down on paper. Sometimes I write here just to please myself, and sometimes I write with a reader in mind so I can actually reach someone through this. It's very difficult to make emotional connections with people on an everyday basis. Imagine this as a kind of message in a bottle, or a time capsule, or maybe a fishing line. Whatever, however or whoever, I don't think there is anything really special or very informative in my diaries, but it's a part of me. Not a whole representation, but an element of myself, the part that writes in diaries. So I hope you have felt something from reading this, and maybe you've learned something too, that it's no good just saying the same old things to yourself and worrying about the same things. If you always worry about the same things, and that never seems to change, why not choose to not worry about them? What difference would it make to your life? How about making a decision to try to make the most of your life? Think positive, worry less, but be mindful and considerate of your actions. Enjoy yourself, enrich your life, take risks, but be prepared to face the consequences. Or don't take risks, but don't regret those decisions. Communicate with your loved ones and stick by your family. If you have something good to say it. Even if it's just written in a diary, it's there, somewhere in the world, representing you and your positive feeling. Don't be too quick to deal out judgment. We can't see all the angles in every situation, and there's usually some reason for something. Everyone has a place in the world, and we all affect each other somehow, so try to trust the world around you. This is beginning to sound like I'm preaching. I hope you enjoyed my hospital diary. I hope I captured the experience for you. Luke. So that's it. For what it's worth, those were my Japanese hospital diaries, and I felt compelled to read them out to you. I hope that you've enjoyed listening to them, and as I said there, that you learned something from the experience. Leave your comments in the comments section, listeners, if you have any. I don't know. What do you make of that whole experience that I had? I mean, again, I don't think I really managed to kind of get through to the real sort of profound stuff, but it felt like a fairly profound experience for me. I guess I learnt to perhaps look after myself. I grew up a little bit. I learnt perhaps how to control my mind a little bit more. How to... I learnt a certain amount of... I learnt how to find a bit more peacefulness in your mind or something. Okay, this has got to be the last time I cover this story on this podcast. I think I've probably got it out of my system now. But let me know how that was for you. Was that interesting? I mean, what did you get from that? Have you ever had a similar experience? Have you ever had glandular fever? How was it for you? And just which things that came up in this episode stay in your mind? Which things struck a chord with you? Let me know in the comments section. Okay, and I'll speak to you again in the next episode. Actually, hold on a second, that's not the end. Because after finishing this episode, I went and had lunch. And I just thought to myself about a couple of other things I wanted to add at the end of this episode, just to kind of wrap this up. One of those things was, it's a pity that I can't find that other diary, because I wrote one final diary entry, which I think summarized the whole experience quite well and explained and told the story about what happened when I left the hospital and stuff like that. So it's a real pity I can't find that. And so that's that. That's one thing. Another thing is that I wanted to say something about writing a diary. Let's see, two things. First thing is that for me personally, looking back at some of my old diaries again, I feel like I wish I had written more about the actual things that happened to me, people I met, places I went to, and the stuff that happened. So I wish I had given more of an account of things that went on. Now, this Japanese holiday diary, kind of a holiday, this Japanese hospital diary was a bit different because I was actually a lot of the time talking about things that were happening to me. But my other diaries, a lot of those ones are just filled with just very introspective stuff. Me trying to express my innermost feelings, expressing just moments when I would feel frustrated or whatever. That's when I would write in my diary. And so it's kind of very internal, introspective stuff. And now, several decades or more after that, I look back at those diaries and think to myself, what would have been much better would be if I had actually written about the things that had happened, places I'd been to, people I'd seen, and written more of an account of each day or account of moments in my life with my thoughts and feelings attached to it, because I think that would be much more interesting to read and also much more evocative as well. When you read those things again, it really brings you back to the feelings, emotions, and also allows you to kind of see what happened, how did I react to things. I think that's much more interesting. So if you are writing a diary, I would recommend that you do write about the things that have happened to you. Don't just write about your thoughts and feelings without the events and moments that are attached to them as well. Another thing about writing a diary is that actually it can be a very good exercise for your English. And I've said before that if you're looking for ways to work on your English, you've got to try and find various ways. And for writing, I think it's a very good idea to write a diary in English, and it doesn't have to be that ambitious. You can just write about a couple of things you did and the things that you learned from them, or things, the way you felt about them. You can try and express your feelings, describe things you did, talk about how you feel. Try and write regularly, even if it's just a paragraph each day. That can be, I think, a good exercise because it helps you to find your voice in English. Now, I started writing a diary when I was about 16, and I more or less finished writing a diary, I don't know, maybe about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, something like that, when I decided that it was time to stop for various reasons. What was my point? So so I wrote a diary for from maybe the age of 16 to about the age of 36, something like that. So that's about, is that 20 years? That's about 20 years of diary writing, quite a lot. I think it did help me with my ability to talk and my ability to articulate my thoughts and feelings. I think it really did. And I think that writing regularly in English, you could be writing about anything. But actually putting your ideas down, trying to structure your ideas and express yourself in English is a very good exercise. So I would recommend doing that, writing a diary. Obviously, when you're improving your writing, you've got to think about the kinds of writing that you will probably have to do in English, which would probably mean writing emails, writing reports, maybe writing essays, things like that. What kinds of writing will you really need to do, or do you really need to do? So obviously it would be a good idea to practice writing those specific types of text, because there's all of the, there's all the structural things, organizational things, text, conventions of those sorts of texts as well that you've got to practice. But at the basic level, expressing yourself in English in writing regularly, I think is a very good exercise. Okay, what else did I want to say? I wanted to maybe just mention what happened after I left the hospital. So I was discharged from the hospital. I said goodbye to Chandra Sant, managed to say goodbye to him. I hadn't really developed any kind of relationship with anyone else in the hospital, so I at least said goodbye to him. And then off I went after spending, about 2 weeks in there. And I had a bag, like a fairly large shoulder bag with all my stuff in it that people had brought me. Clothes and books and my mini disc player and mini discs and other bits and pieces. So I had that over my shoulder, and going out into the world was kind of weird. Going out into the busy, bustling nature of the world, just trying to walk down the street, avoiding people crossing the road and people getting in your way. It was already exhausting just walking to the train station. And it seemed like a really long and difficult journey. I was only in the hospital for just about 2 weeks. It's not even that long. But you get accustomed to that kind of pace of life and the quietness and stuff. And so being back outside was tiring. I made it back to my apartment and was very tired. It was exhausting. Carrying the bag, walking up and down steps was really tiring. I still had quite a lot of, recovery to do from this not very serious condition, right? But the annoying thing was, I remember I got to my door and looked for my key card to open the door to my apartment and realised I didn't have it, that I'd given it to one of my colleagues so they could go into my apartment and get my stuff for me. So I got all the way to my apartment door and couldn't get in, and it was in the middle of the day. It was like lunchtime or something. And I was so dejected and so sort of depressed at that moment. I remember just sitting down on the steps with my bag and just feeling so bloody sorry for myself and such a loser. Eventually, a friend of mine who lived in the same building as me, I think I texted him. He managed to bring me some keys. During his lunch break or something, he came and gave me keys to his apartment. So I went into his apartment and I spent a few hours until my other colleague was able to come and meet me and give me the key. I spent a few hours just basically lying down on their sofa, listening to the new Beck album. And this was 2002, and Beck's latest album was called Sea Change. So I remember lying there listening to Sea Change, which is actually quite a sort of sad album. It's a fantastic album, but it's quite sad. So I had this very sad sort of moment lying there, listening to this Beck album. And then eventually got my key card, and I was then able to get back into my apartment. It was weird to see all my stuff again. And then, that started my 2-week recovery period where I didn't have to work. As I said before, living very quietly and slowly. Then my parents and my brother arrived, and they were there for about 10 days. And that was actually great, obviously, because I got to spend some time with them after having had this unpleasant experience, and showed them around the place, and we visited some tourist areas. And then I was feeling much better when it was time to work again, and went back to work and learned how to pace myself, learned various tricks as a teacher. You sort of learn these tricks over the years of how to manage your energy levels, how to prepare yourself in advance. And the course books that we used in that particular school, I got to know lots of the lessons very, very well, and was able to kind of go into lessons knowing that I was going to do like lesson 7A, and I just had it all, every step of the lesson mapped out in my brain already, and had worked, doing those lessons again and again and again, you kind of learn the best ways to do them. So it got easier and easier and more enjoyable. And the next year of my life in Japan was one of the best years of my life as a whole, I think. I had ups and downs, and the glandular fever sort of seemed to come back sometimes, and I'd feel really tired, and I'd get migraine headaches and stuff occasionally. But I deepened my experience in Japan and kind of got involved in other things. Like I joined another band and played some really interesting concerts with them, and just, basically went on to have a really great 12 months. After 2 years, I decided I had to leave Japan. One of the reasons for that was that my mum was ill and I wanted to be home, to be there. Luckily, she recovered fully and the rest of it, of course, as you know, because she's been on the podcast and the rest of it. But I wanted to go home and be there. And another reason was that I knew that if I stayed longer in Japan, then it would have been really hard for me to leave. You know? You kind of think, right, I'm going to get out now after 2 years, because if I stay longer, I'm going to end up here for 15 years. And I didn't want to be that far away from my family. And I felt like my life back home, which in a way felt like my real life, was waiting for me. And I had to go back and try and work on some other kind of career. In the end, I continued teaching English. So that's kind of part of what happened. My girlfriend at the time, who I've mentioned a lot during this episode, we broke up a couple of months after the events of this episode. Not that we were ever really that serious. I won't go into all the details. Her parents and both her and her parents were lovely and very sweet. Her parents were so patient and helpful with me. And my parents were particularly thankful to my girlfriend's parents, for looking after me when they couldn't. So that's all I wanted to add at the end of this episode. Okay. All right. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, for what it's worth, and I will speak to you in the next one. But for now, it's time to say goodbye. Bye. Bye. Bye.